Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome to the Property Couch podcast. Hello, Ben. How are you?
G'day, mate. How you going?
All right.
Hey, how about the 51st Derby? How did that go on the weekend? Good to see your crowd there. Get along, support the boys in purple.
Yes.
Where did we end up? What happened?
You know what happened? That's an unfair. I would have thought that was unprovoked. I was happy to just go on with the day's activities, but you're digging up the past.
I'm just looking. I mean, obviously we had a good win on Friday.
So that was the segue.
Go
That
Pies.
was the segue, was it? Just so that you could go. All right. Well, by the way, did you know what Collingwood did?
Did you come off 2 wins? So you had a good little run there. That's pretty good for a Freo.
All right. Well, mate, don't get me started. We travel every week. We have to. There's no go home factor. Everyone wants to play over here for you guys. So, mate, if you want to talk about that, let's.
If you want to play in the big boys and get in the arena, you're going to have to.
Well, let's just say the West Coast on the Western Australian side is one of the most successful AFL clubs.
Correct.
Not VFL,
So
Ben. You like to hang your hat on all the VFL records.
You've just undone your
the AFL.
You've just undone your claim there that it's all hard to travel when they do it and are successful.
Yeah. Well, you just let me know how many premierships you got compared to the West, mate. That's when we'll.
I think it's
anyway,
16 or 17. Yes, we should move on. I'm sorry, I should have been a bit kinder there. Obviously, this whole.
Well, it was unprovoked,
thing.
mate. I wasn't ready for it. I thought we were going to have a good start to the day, and then you've gone and just trout
this ISO thing. I'm obviously stuck inside, and
you got the swagger. You got the swagger that every single person who's listening to this wants to kneecap you because you got that pathetic.
I'll make it up
swagger.
to you. Well, it's not pathetic. They're successful. The Pies are a good operation. They're, well organised.
Yeah.
Well coached. That's why you took.
If only we could get a read. Like when you have a Facebook Live and you get the thumbs up, thumbs
the
down.
worm.
Just wish we could get the thumbs down.
I get it. I'm embellishing the. Yes.
Hey, Ben, face masks.
Yes.
Today is the first day for face masks here in behind the steel curtain here in Melbourne.
Yep.
So that's a bit of adjustment. How are you coping with that?
Well, yes, I'm one of 2 people that go into the office, Bryce. So when I go into the office, I have to wear a face mask now. And obviously, when I'm out getting my fried rice for lunch or my chicken roll as part of my living and lifestyle budget, because I'm trying to support the local little coffee shops and takeaways to keep them going. I just put my mask on.
Not supporting Uber Eats to get it to drop off, so you don't have to.
No, I definitely go out and I put my mask on. I've been doing that for the last week. But yes, it's not great down here, Bryce, because unfortunately, there's this conversation around submission versus eradication. We are nowhere near going to get eradication, because we're not compliant. We're not Victor. We don't download the app. There's just too many people that aren't doing the right thing. So you're dreaming to even waste time talking about elimination when people aren't doing the right thing. But we'll get there. I'm still, incredibly optimistic and incredibly calm. I see a bright future.
Well, Ben, I think the theme of today is really around what we're seeing on the ground as a buying group.
Yes,
it's really a flight to quality, Ben. Because if you actually think about some of the people that have been affected by the 2.0 lockdown, there'd be lots of cafe, pub, all those sorts of people that they were gearing up, Ben, to be in a position where they could really start to open up their doors a bit more. And now all of a sudden they've had to shut it down, and in some cases they had to do advanced decisions on stock and food and all those sorts of things in anticipation of a bigger crowd. So there are a bunch of people in a world of pain, right? So A, we want to pause and acknowledge that, but 2,
absolutely.
We understand that there is a bit of chatter. I mean, I had someone reach out to me during the week who lives in Mildura, Ben, and said, how are you coping with all the negativity around property market falling off a cliff, right? And I had to chuckle, Ben, because
I just did.
flight to quality versus headlines, right? Because there is a disparity between the types of properties that that we've talked about for 296 episodes, Ben, versus a generalized statement, because our team is finding competition on the ground. And I just think that in a time like this, it's really the people who are going to succeed are the people who are prepared, and the people who are not going to succeed are the people who are unprepared. And so I guess that's why we've been very comfortable with our message around calm, Ben, because we know that we've prepared our clients by making sure that they have anticipated something down the road. Now, clearly at the time that we were anticipating something down the road, we didn't think it would be a pandemic. Let's be totally frank about that. But we did plan for something in terms of happening that was an X factor. So, and for our listeners, we've been saying winter is coming for a long time. We've said prepared for winter is coming. And the way that we said to prepare for that is through asset selection. So I would just like to leave people today, Ben, with the overarching theme of it is all about a flight to quality. If you're buying quality assets, if you have a plan to buy a property that would be considered a flight to quality, you have the ability, and you're prepared, you have the ability to withstand the negativity that's coming via the news, by the heightened anxiety, particularly in Victoria, around people wearing masks, and they haven't had to see that before. But in terms of preparing for your financial future, Ben, it's all about a flight to quality.
And Bryce, my message has been consistent right throughout this, is if you believe that there is a post-virus world where we can get back to normality, then you should be going about your planning with that view, with an optimistic, pragmatic but optimistic view, as opposed to a pessimistic view. Now, we're seeing already some of the trials coming in regards to, the results, and they're showing good signs, no guarantees, but good signs. But the world will be back to some level of normality, and then eventually we'll have a vaccine. And with that view, you do take advantage of these. I'm again acknowledging those people who have been impacted, who are doing it tough. This is not their time,
No.
but for everybody else, I mean, when this is an opportune time that people will look back in 2, 3, 5 years and go, oh man, why didn't I see that coming? Because you've got record low interest rates, you've got governments and regulators who are going to do whatever it takes to get the economy back on track and continue to provide that stimulus. We've moved past the September cliff.
Ben. But even on the September cliff, Ben, really
we told people it was never going to happen, right?
Did everyone think that the big master power switch, Ben? What did they think, that the government and the banks were just going to go? All right, we spend all this stimulus, and then all of a sudden, all right, okay, September's come. Let's just drop the switch and let's just turn it all off. It was never going to happen. And the fact that I think Cameron Cusher recently put an article out, Cameron Cusher, who's the chief researcher at REA, around the fact that whether or not it's fair is a different debate. But whenever there is trouble, there will always be a recovery mechanism through property. We had the CEO of the Property Council Australia, Ken Morrison, come on. He talked about at length about the size of it. It's too big to fail. So put aside the fact whether it's fair, Ben, that the property industry and therefore tradies and all those sorts of things are the beneficiary of any stimulus that comes when we get into trouble. Whether that's fair or not is another discussion. But the reality is that's where it will always be channeled because of the multiplier effect.
That's right. I mean, where does the smart money go, Bryce? The smart money goes where there are protections and things like too big to fail, too important for the economy. So I tap the backs of people who recognise that to sort of say that's not a bad place to put your money, and the whole risk and volatility is there. Now that said, we are definitely seeing in the high-rise market that yields are definitely down, so rents are down considerably, and there is going to be a bit of pain. And considering the majority of investors were buying what we would call this investment stock, which we've always said is not in your best interest from a return on investment. You should never touch it, has been our view. Those investors are going to, unfortunately, have a tough time of it. And we've always said, that this is going to result in less investor activity, which in reality, because if you buy existing property versus brand new property, you're going to be so much better served because you've got historical reference points, you've got land that's fully utilised, you can measure demand and supply ratios a lot better than that, and so that's why we're busy. I mean, I'm not just saying that, but we are at a very busy level because we don't serve thousands and thousands of clients every month, but we serve hundreds, and those people know that this is a great opportunity, and I give credit to them. They're the ones who are the heroes here. They're the ones who are backing themselves and saying, you know what, I am gainfully employed. I've got a good understanding of my numbers. I want to get that validated through some advice, and I'm going to push forward because I see the medium to long term. And it's a great little segue into today's show, part 2 about how you do this over a period of time. You don't get caught in the here and now. And there was a graphic that Alan Kohler pulled up recently, Bryce, about it measures the negativity in the sentiment and commentary and in the media, and it measured Australia versus the rest of the world, right? And it was unbelievable in terms of the level of hysteria and negativity in the media around this COVID-19 event. And it has got me thinking a lot about why would that be the case? Well, because obviously in other parts of the world, they've got potentially high levels of corruption. They've got, less regulation and protections, less safety nets. They're not as isolated as we are here as a nation. So I think part of that is we don't get to experience really difficult events or challenging times as much as maybe other parts of the world do, because we're very blessed with great living standards and so forth. So this is a bit of a shock to our system because we do feel this. Well, this sort of stuff doesn't happen in Australia, but it is quite striking, and hence coming back to the call from the Mildura focus. How do you deal with it? It's really simple. We just basically go to the facts. We keep looking. We keep
Stay
looking
prepared.
looking at the data.
Scouts up. Be prepared.
Yeah, and we keep exercising our judgment in terms of what's the best thing to do. And in this particular point in time, and in an amazing time, if you do have a monetary situation to organise your money, get set up, and then also again, it is definitely a transfer of wealth time. There is some of that going on here, and that is an opportunity. So for those people who are in a position to do so, it's great to see they are the heroes. They are the ones who have sought help, and they've now created a lot of hope and promise for their futures.
Yeah, it's a good point too, Ben. The reference of the country, it's good to think about. Sometimes we see it through the lens of a microscope rather than a telescope, because we are a country that is a continent, that is an island, and they are some incredible advantages that we have over lots of people around the world, because quite often they share a border, or even within particular countries, they have states that aren't in unity on how they want to cover this. So I think we talked about this on the very first podcast when COVID kicked off seriously, Ben, around the Roaring 20s, and the fact that we see this decade as being probably the best decade maybe ever to accumulate real estate, given the unprecedented demand that we will be, the post-mortem that we have on the decade of the 20s, when we're talking about this in 2030, will be that, the unprecedented demand for it. So, but clearly, the 20s hasn't got off to a good start. But it doesn't remove the fact that we're a desirable island that people would love to come and live in, and that will happen, and that will place demand on real estate. So important things for us to remember. I just wanted to say before we kick onto the show, Ben, which may be the longest intro we've ever done, and we've done some long ones. there was a recent report about how rental is dropping across the Sydney and Melbourne. That was the reference.
Yeah.
But then when you dived in, it was just about CBD.
Correct.
So again, it's just a classic because I can assure you, I have a dashboard, Ben, on every single purchase that we make.
Yep.
I know the rental. I know how long it takes for it to get rented. I know how long it's taken since we've settled and we don't have a tenant in it. And I can assure you our track record is generally it's 5 days or less, and very rarely does it get to double figures in terms of the number of days of vacancy. So,
and we're blessed with a system that has 15,500 suburbs, almost 16,000 suburbs in our data research system, Bryce, and we get to look at that every day, and we know what's happening in markets within markets, right? So yes, I mean, the red lights are everywhere in regards to high density city locations where there are lots of towers, lots of clusters of units. There are red lights going off in Melbourne and Sydney all across that. But then 2 suburbs across, 3 suburbs across, no red lights.
No.
Just good. The indicators are good, and so that's why we have to comment in the media when we get asked around Melbourne and Sydney. What do we think of the forecast for those particular markets? But we've always been consistent about, okay, well, we're not buying Melbourne, we're not buying Sydney, we're buying into pockets of the market, and I think that's the message for everyone, right? In terms of you're not buying the Melbourne market, so the Melbourne market, which may show a result of another 1% drop to maybe 1.5% drop this month, is that the market that you've bought into? And if you are actively looking yourself as a DIY, which we encourage you, that's why we do this podcast, to help educate you, you will know in the areas that you're looking at how much competition you've got on yourself. And those people, I'm sure, would ring in or write in or email us or send a voice message to us. There is demand, and they are under competition, and they are not getting any bargains in the areas that are already experiencing demand. So those people know it. So when they look at the news and they see, Melbourne's doing this or Sydney's doing that, they're going, not where I'm looking. And we all know that the job builder package has also been a real success in terms of, we heard from the Housing Industry Association some incredibly positive numbers about their phones haven't been ringing. There's
it's doing its job.
It's doing a great job of book building, right? So and that's the stimulus that we needed from September onwards. And then again, we're going to see the results of wearing masks and potentially, hopefully a couple of weeks, we start to see our numbers decline. People doing the right thing. If they are getting tested, they go home and they stay home and they isolate until they get their results. It's clear that, unfortunately, we have those people who are non-compliant, which is difficult, right? This virus will be with us for that time period. So it's something we've just got to look at, right?
Very true. So, hey, Ben, my Mindset Minute theme today is care of Emily Wallace, who's a buyer's agent here in Melbourne. So she'll be listening, Ben. But on her social, she put up this quote, was your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. And that was Buddha.
Yep.
And I thought that was really, I thought it was good. And I thought it was a segue because this week we, as you know, Ben, we arranged for an outside specialist. Our CEO, Jamie, arranged for an outside specialist to talk to our entire group to help them through mental wealth effectively as we're in work from home status, Ben. So, which is really good. But one of the things that she talked about was it's particularly important for us to control what we can control. So if you, for those people that are in lockdown, I'm talking specifically, Ben, because I'm lucky, Ben. I'm not in lockdown because I'm outside of the steel curtain at the moment, but there are a lot of people that are, right, including a lot of our team. And so being able to control what you can control, because unguarded thoughts around when will this end leads to uncertainty and anxiety versus what can I do now with what I'm currently faced with, which was part of what we were doing yesterday to help our team to better understand what boundaries they can do, how they can transition from work from home to make sure that they're getting the balance. What can they actually do to be putting into their mind so that we can actually navigate this, which is the new norm. Unfortunately, as you said before, it's something that we're going to have to live with for a little while. So I just thought that was really important, that your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded, Ben. And as you know, I'm a big fan of we are the storyteller, not just the actor. So we get to determine what happens, what we think about, where we go, where the mind goes, the body follows. So
story state strategy, Bryce, from Jamin Fraser.
Absolutely.
A wonderful framework.
It's a wonderful framework. So there you go, folks. That's something that I'd like to give you leading into the weekend, around making sure that you control the story that you're playing in your mind around whatever circumstances. My hometown of Perth, Ben, they're obviously 30,000 can go to the footy. Clearly, where we're based here in Melbourne, people can't even leave their home. So my life hack today is actually going to be a lead on from this, Ben. So I'll talk about that later.
Beautiful.
But wanted to really set it up with that particular quote. And thanks to Emily for that. Hey, Q&A day. What do you want to know about $2,000 per week passive income, Ben? Today is part 2. Last week was part 1, and we got so much response that we certainly want to lean into it. But I'm going to crack on, Ben, and we're going to see how many of these that we can get through, and I mention as how many people as possible. But Escher Freichberg, any advice for those who want to be able to semi-retire on less with the portfolio sitting in the background, working towards that goal, i.e. having a portfolio that is making $1,000 a week by age 50 with the aim of making $2,000 a week by 65? Or is this just going to be the natural progression of a maturing portfolio? Would like to be able to gradually have the option of winding back work rather than working hard for 20 years and stopping. And we can relate to that, Ben, because we have a profession that we love doing. It's certainly not something that we want to end in a hurry. And this other one is Craig Chalmers. If looking to keep a $2,000 per week passive income in retirement, when do you switch from growth to yield assets for passive income? Or do you purchase both through acquisition phase as a balanced portfolio and then sell down the growth asset to realise the gains and pay off the yield asset for holding the passive income? So, Ben, that's just to stimulate a bit of flow for us.
Oh, goodness me.
Have a bit of a spin wag.
We could spend
we could go off track here.
We could spend 30 minutes on this. I'm going to start with some of the language that was used. Natural progression from Escher. That actually in investment returns talks about the compounding effect, and how the compounding effect is a combination of demand growth or value growth, as well as indexation, or in some cases we might sometimes call it inflationary growth as well, right? So you get a combination of the two. Now, the idea, Escher, that yes, by 50 that you may be generating $1,000 is a very real possibility. And you're absolutely right. As time progresses, you are going to get that wealth accumulation occurring, right? Even though you're not doing anything for it. It's just happening in the background as assets appreciate, and obviously you're reviewing your rent and having a market rent for the location that you're in based on the supply and demand drivers at that time. So yes, you could quite easily have 1,000. The big thing you've got to be focused in on is what is your leverage position at that time, because that leverage position is going to determine exactly how much passive income you're generating, right? So the levers that we talk about, income, expenditure, time, and target, what we're talking about there really is the debt component. So you could be netting $1,000 a week, which is helping retire the remainder of the debt out, and then organically over the next decade, all of a sudden that becomes 2. So we refer to this when we're sitting down and presenting planning strategies to each client, because everyone's unique. But we do say, have a look at this, guys. At the age of retirement, you are getting that $2,000 a week. Now, interestingly enough, because you've retired your debt, you're going to get a pay rise over the next 5 or 10 years, and it's going to be more and more and more. Now, in other cases, which sort of leans into Craig's final part of his question, where he's saying, do you sell down? Well, the best types of strategies we build are the ones where the capital base doesn't get impacted. That they're the best type.
Key point.
But in some cases,
folks.
In some cases, there may need to be a sell down of an asset, and that's got everything to do with the time that you started and potentially the target you set yourself. Now, because we're talking about a target of $2,000, that's a ballpark, but again, it's all about the forecasting and modeling that we do. Bryce, I could go on for another 20 minutes, but I want to give you a go because there's a couple of other things I want to come back into, but I want to, return serve to you.
Well, the thing is, mate, you emphasised keyword 3 times then time, because the secret sauce of all of this is the time, right? Because it's all about lifestyle design, and lifestyle design comes from the passive income. So the longer you can actually hold this portfolio, the more likely you are to be able to retire out the debt, the more likely you are to have a growth in the wealth base, and you're more likely to have a drag up effect of the rents that come with that, because the lifestyle design comes from the cash flow or the rent or the passive income band. It doesn't come from the wealth base. Because if the listener thinks about, they might be sitting in a principal place of residence home, being wealthy on paper, Ben, but not having a really great lifestyle. The lifestyle comes from the cash flow. The lifestyle comes from the liquidity that allows you to do the things that you want to do, which is why time is the secret sauce. And so I wrote it down, but you already said it, that the capital base is the fundamental, in a perfect scenario, is you have enough time in the marketplace to retire out the debt so that the capital base remains untouched, so that you can then actually still create a lifestyle. Lifestyle design is what this is all about. $2,000 a week just means lifestyle design, Ben. And if you've still got the capital base, it means that for someone who's got a super strategy right now, Ben, is they are using some of the super each year to live on, so that the capital base diminishes over time. So you have an exponential decrease in your lifestyle design because the base is disappearing. Whereas what we're trying to say here is the base not only stays the same, we're not eating the base, we're actually using the cash flow that spits off it. But it also over time will continue to grow if you hold it, and you get exponential returns if you've retired out the debt. So the secret sauce, folks, is the time. The wealth is not the game here. The wealth gives you a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling and a feeling of security, but the lifestyle design comes from what comes from the wealth base, and that's the cash flow that spits off.
And that's an awesome segue into my next piece here, Bryce, in terms of embellishing what you're saying. With what Craig's asking the question about whether you buy growth or yield assets, one thing that people need to remember, that a growth asset can spit off huge amounts of rent if it continues to outperform in regards to its capital growth projection. So a lot of people can potentially get seduced by a really high yielding asset in a regional location, by way of example. But because that regional location doesn't have the demand, population and growth drivers that push up the value, or the incomes that push up the value over an extended period of time, because people are transient, they come there for short periods of time. They've got this amazing amount of income that they spit off, but they don't grow in value. Now, the assets that you might buy that are in a metropolitan area, in an established area where, the houses have been there for 100 years, 50 years, 30 years, and it's all fully developed, the capital growth in those particular areas will push up the rent, because ultimately, when migrants come to the country and when people want to leave their own home, young people want to leave their home, they are making choices about where they want to live for lifestyle aspect, setting themselves up, and they'll pay a premium to live in those locations. So as the value of the asset grows, so does your rental return. And that's what you were saying before, Bryce, about you live off that passive income and you get that accelerated capital growth. So I did a little bit of homework, and I just want to share, I know it's a podcast, so I'm going to share just some numbers with people, because you can cash in that asset wealth at some point. So we don't say you have to do it, but potentially you could. So capital growth is still the bee's knees, as Jeremy Shepherd, the capital growth king, will tell you. It is the bee's knees of property investing, right? So I've just worked up a little example on my spreadsheet here where I've got a $750,000 purchase price, Bryce. And this is very simple numbers. I've got 7% capital growth.
Yep.
And I've got 4% rental return. Okay,
Yep.
7% capital. Now I'm going to switch that on its head for my comparison. which is a 4% capital growth story and a 7% rental yield. Now, people might go, where do you get 7%? Well, of course, this is my point. You're going to get them in mining towns. You're going to get them in areas where there is
higher risk.
Higher risk, right? So you've got to be careful there. Now, if we fast forward 20 years, Bryce, here are the numbers, right? Here are the numbers. The property that grew at 7% is now worth $2.9 million. I know, sounds ridiculous, right? Now, if I still was able to keep a 4% rental yield, which I should be able to because it's market rent for a 750 property, 4% is about right, 3.5 to 4%. I'm earning $116,000 of rent on that property per annum.
That's the lifestyle design vehicle right there, Ben.
Correct. Versus the other property, I'm earning $115,000. So it has been a little cash cow, right? So it's done its job in at that 7%, but it's only worth 1.6%, Bryce. Sorry, 1.6 million.
That's all right. I speak, Ben.
Thank you. So there's a difference of $1.2 million in your asset base. Now again, it's illustrative purposes in terms of over that time frame, but it just articulates that we always want to try and get growth in the mix. If we can get growth, we normally go for little cash cows at the end of the strategy, but the primary asset that we want to buy early, if we've got that strong surplus, is a growth asset. And then we might go to balanced assets where we get a blend of growth and yield. And then if we need those little cash cows to retire the debt out, that has been our sort of policy framework. But again, if a household doesn't have that strong surpluses, but they still want to start planning for tomorrow, sometimes we can start with a balanced asset or even a little cash cow to get the conversation started.
Time, target, income and expense spend, depends which levers you need to pull, determines which ones you buy there. But that's an interesting example that you pulled up there, Ben, because at the end of 20 years, they were on parity for rental income, 116 versus 115, but definitely not on parity in terms of the value of the assets. And then obviously throughout that 20 years, that extra equity that was created probably allowed the leverage for the next one, which then became an exponential return on the wealth base with a similar outcome for the rental yield. So
and those people, Bryce, who think, so in the first year it's $32,100 in gross rent for the growth asset, and it's $54,600 for the yielding asset. So people are going to go, well, that's $22,000 extra. What if I put that money to good use? In other words, if it's cash flow positive, why wouldn't I just rinse and repeat? And this has been an argument that has been around for the 20 odd plus years that I've been doing this. And I could, at the time when I was exploring early in my, development of understanding all this stuff, I thought, gee, you could just rinse and repeat. And that's what, when I say a lot of people, when we look at the ATO data, which we'll look at later, it's not a lot of people, but the ones who are coming with their names up in lights with the 15 and 20 and 30 odd properties, that was their strategy. And in the day, the banks had an appetite to keep lending to those people. That appetite is now diminishing rapidly, and it's very difficult to move beyond, sort of 4 or 5 properties. So, those people are now finding themselves who executed on that strategy, they're going to have to sell 1 or 2 of their properties to then go and buy a capital growth asset. So they're experiencing a capital gain event and the recycle costs of stamp duty and all that. Whereas, the people who have designed, lifestyle design as you call it, has just said, I just need 3 or 4 good properties over a reasonable period of time, have just said, well, nothing to see here. I'm just getting on with my life, and I'm just planning in the background in terms of what happens to support the family.
Yeah, so Ben, so therefore the question is, are we a negatively gearing based philosophy, or do we positively geared or positive cash flow? The answer is no. It is effectively whatever you need.
Correct.
But all things being equal, you said it, you touched on it before, the idea is to get some growth early, some balance in the middle, and some yield at the end. That's a textbook strategy where lift the wealth base, in the middle of the accumulation, start to transition towards a bit more yield, but still need some wealth, need some heavy lifting done on the wealth base, and then towards the end retire out the debt. That's a very that would be, if we could colour in the lines for everyone, that would be the idea, Ben. But you said it before. Some people, like, the circumstances just mean you can't do that. Someone who's got less time versus someone who's got more time but less income. There's just so many variables. But
yeah, and that's where equity also plays a role too, doesn't it? Sorry.
Say that again.
That's where equity also plays that role, right? So yes, so you're saying in a vacuum.
Yeah, in a vacuum, that's what we'd chase growth first, but not everyone lives in a vacuum, Ben. Everyone lives in reality. So, Hey, Esha and Craig, good questions. I think they're really. I wanted to open with those, Ben, because I think clearly we're doing a bad job of moving through these, but I think there's a lot of gold that can be delivered in those two questions on the summit, on the way the summit to creating lifestyle through getting $2,000 per week. Hey, Ben, this one's from Steve Gilmore. Always reminds me of Happy Gilmore, but when I read that, but in retirement, would you prefer $2 million worth debt-free or $4 million with $2 million of debt, both being net $2 million, Ben?
Every day of the week, $4 million with $2 million in debt, Ross. You know, the story of the two kids in the sandpit, where the one boy says to the other, he says, "You look worried." He goes, "Yeah, Mum and Dad told me that we owe the bank."
We're so poor, we owe the bank $2 million. Yeah,
we're so poor.
Story.
We're so poor. Well, just we'll put it in context. We're so poor, we owe the bank $250,000 on our mortgage, and the other kids said, "We're so rich, we owe the bank $2 million." The point being there is that, and again, that's we're not interested in debt. What we're interested in is controlling an asset base. We've always talked about debt as being a vehicle that you need to have it in part of your armory to leverage into sensible property investment. But that's why we're so big on cash flow management and money smarts and getting that organised, because debt can be dangerous, leverage can be dangerous, and so we've always talked not about good debt and bad debt. That was what I learnt when I first started. That's morphed into productive debt. So we want our debt to be in assets that are appreciating and that give us productive outcomes, and that builds our wealth base. So every day of the week, it wouldn't bother me that I would have that 2 million. I would obviously, there's more to that story around how much is that 4 million is spitting off income to service the 2 million, because look, if I had to sell the 4 million to remain with just 2 million of debt free, that's not the position that I want to be in, because it's a moot point. But the assumption is that my 4 million is also generating income through, whether it be property rental yields or dividends through shares or whatever that looks like. So, but I definitely like the idea of holding quality assets, and debt doesn't bother me as much if I'm on top of my numbers.
Ben, we're making an assumption here that the 4 million, let's say it grows at 7%, and the 2 million grows at 7%, because clearly if one was well over the other. Yes. But because I always think, instead of good debt, bad debt, it's horrible, tolerable, and productive. So horrible is stuff going down, tolerable is for the principal place of residence, and then productive is for income producing assets. So that's worth remembering here. But clearly the idea is, well, I want to change the paradigm too, Ben, that people get scared of debt, and that's understandable because we've been conditioned. But instead of thinking about the amount of debt that you have on the balance sheet, think about the cost of the debt on the profit and loss statement. Because if you're thinking, it can be scary to think about having $2 million worth of debt versus zero. But if the cost of servicing the 2 million is, I don't know, throw a number out there, $500 a week or $400 a week, whatever it is, and you've got the capacity to manage that, that's a better number to focus on, because then you won't get the collie wobbles, Ben. Because you think about lifting the Premiership Cup too early, and that's why you don't get the chocolates done on the big day. Whereas if you just focused on what you could get done quarter by quarter, you probably would have a few more premierships in the cabinet.
I'm so glad that you've been able to return serve. Well done, and weave that in. That was brilliant. Round of applause. Fair enough. I deserve that slap down.
Steve Gilmore, good question. Thank you for that. Hopefully everyone else got some benefit out of it. Adam Wild, Legends, first time caller, long time listener. What are the pros and cons of passive versus active strategy to retire out the debt? What would you guys prefer, given the choice to do either?
Yeah, I mean, there are the pros of active is it's not really investing.
Yeah.
I've said this a lot that that if you're an investor, like in the true sense of the definition, you should be giving other people your money or investing into something and sort of being an active bystander to allow that to, you know, so same sort of thing. I don't invest in shares, I invest in companies and I invest in their probability of returning the money that I've invested when I'm looking at the share market. When I look at property, the same sort of thing. I'm investing in a tangible assets. I'm investing in land. I'm investing in the bricks and mortar on top of that. And if I do my research well, then I'm a walking proof that through that research I can be an investor without having to do renovations or any type of risky or active stuff, and I can just get on with my life. As opposed to an active strategy, you are sacrificing a lot more time and energy to be able to, one, accelerate that because you're looking for a better return. But I always say to people, put a dollar value on your time. So when you're doing your feasibility studies on whether you want to be an active investor or a renovator for profit, whatever, put $100 on your time and then see if the project still stacks up, because that's what you're doing. You are basically saying, all right, I'm not going to have a life outside of my investing, or my life is going to be impacted because my investment is going to take up my free time outside of the third of my life that I spend working. So if you're spending a third of your life working, a third of your life sleeping, and you've got a third of your life of, say, leisure time, you're taking away a lot of that leisure time to accelerate that. So we don't begrudge those people who do that. That's terrific for them. But we're about educating people to say that just, try and do this as a supplementary strategy to allow yourself to get to passive income over time.
It's a good way to look at it, Ben, the third. Robert Kiyosaki 101, Ben, it's stuck in my mind way back to the Rich Dad Poor Dad days, but he said risk is basically a measure of knowledge, right? So for you and I buying an investment property, we don't see that as risky at all, given our experience and the time that we've been doing it. But on the flip side, someone else who's actually never invested in property before and actually thinks buying their own home feels a bit risky, the idea of adding an investment property seems really risky. But it all comes down to knowledge. So if someone's listening to this who is a property developer, Ben, who's very comfortable with feasibility studies, they have a town planners in their back pocket, or they understand town planning. They can see a house and see what you can put on it straight away. Our friend Peter Koulizos has talked to us and shown us a lot of properties in Adelaide where he's looked at it, and most people think that you can only put 2 townhouses on it, but because of what he knows, he can actually put 3 townhouses on it, which actually makes the site very cheap and makes it very, very profitable. And the idea of dealing with builders and getting them to the point of getting the DA up to scratch and then getting the building approval done and then getting the titles issued. To some people, they could do that whilst watching the footy, Ben, right? So therefore, the level of risk for them is very, very low compared to someone who's never invested in property ever before, and then want to add the complexity, of all of those extra things. That is incredibly risky.
Yeah.
So that's my answer to Adam with this question here is, because there's no doubt that people who have the ability, Ben, I've seen it, we both know people who have the ability to go and buy the worst house in the best street, and because of their experience, their knowledge, their connections, their contacts, they know how to turn apples into apple pie very cheaply, very efficiently, and to get the maximum value return on the dollar they've spent. To them, it's a no-brainer to do it, and you talked about putting a value on their time. For them, it's done very, very quickly, and the same with the property development.
Yeah.
But the point that you're trying to make is, for most people, they do not have that level of knowledge that allows that risk gauge to be dropped to a sufficient level. That means that money that you said, Ben, that hourly rate at $100, if you're learning some of this stuff for the first time, $100 an hour is probably not enough. You've probably got to ramp it up, and then the mistake that you make, and then all those sorts of things that compound. So there's a difference here between, is it an effective way to retire out the debt versus is it a suggested way to retire out the debt, because I think that's what it really comes down to. Because we got plenty of people who come onto this podcast, Ben, who have smashed it, and future guests who've come on who will tell us how they've smashed it through being an active investor. But it's really about, I think you might have some stats today, Ben, the latest on property investors, and I think people should hang around for that at the end of this podcast, because that will also remind some folks around how many people are doing active versus passive. So that's a good question, Adam. Appreciate that. I reckon a lot of people would be tossing up with the passive versus active strategy to retire out debt. So great question. Hey, Ben, I've got a grouping here because you'll see the theme when I get through the grouping, but here we go. Megan Mary, how do you achieve it, Ben, without waiting 30 years plus, ? Craig Cooper, how truly doable is it over a 10-year time frame? Jeff William Simons, how do you keep patient and resist the temptation to sell? Costa Ducalis, what strategies do you recommend to retire down the debt sooner than the 20 to 25 year slog? Thinking about older investors close to retirement, or ambitious investors looking to get that 2K per week sooner. Love your work, go the Blues. Stephen Jeremy says, tips on speeding up the process, Ben, on one income, i.e. 70 to 90,000 per annum. I'm onto third property, cheaper properties while renting. Interested in your take on the lower average income. For me, it's taken a long time and balance between quality of life now with the family and looking to the future. And the last one here, Ben Jared Kennedy. Is it possible on a single income without any dependents earning between 70 to 80 grand a year? So, Ben, the last two questions were more about lower income. And the first four questions, Ben, were, I am wanting to speed this up, Ben. The secret sauce is time, I know, but I just want to speed it up.
It's human nature, Bryce, that we all want things to be easier. And in today's world, we all want them to be quicker. I mean, I don't want to have to wait, Bryce, to have financial peace. Why can't I have financial peace at the age of 35? Why do I have to wait all of that time and do the slog and do the hard yards? I get that. And I say with a word of encouragement that I love optimism and I love people who are ambitious, that property spruikers prey on those types of people. They offer incentives and dreams around, 5 properties in 5 years and making it all sound really sexy and easy. And so I always say to people, as a first measure here is, sure, there is potential, and we'll talk a bit more about those in a minute in terms of some of the tips to help you get there. But my starting message here is, if you're going to be a passive investor and you're going to invest for the long term, then it's just part of your life. It's not, and it doesn't dominate. I mean, in the Armchair Guide to Property Investing, Bryce, we talk about a good property shouldn't take any more than 10 hours a year to run. Like, your property manager's giving you your 6 monthly inspection reports, and you're answering a few questions along the way about some maintenance. That's a great property. And, every now and then you've got to look at a tenant over a 2 or 3 year period or whatever it is. So I get why people want instant gratification and why they want to make it easier. And I wrote an article, Bryce. Here's something that probably years ago I was approached to write an article, and I'm going back probably, it would have been 10 years ago now, about how you could create $1 million in wealth in property inside 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously I got into our simulator and I could make the simulator do anything, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the simulator is income, expenditure, time and target. And so I wrote this article about what you need to do in that particular case is you need to spit off cash super quickly. And so, I wrote the article back in the day, and if you think about the time, it was the mining time, so I had to potentially find these super high yielding assets in locations at the time, which could have been Kalgoorlie, because I needed cheap assets because I needed them to grow quickly as well, whereas the more expensive ones in, sort of up in the iron belt, they were too expensive for what I was trying to do because I needed the equity to start out, right? And so I picked a series of assets in mining towns and so forth around the country. Now, obviously that, I said in the article, this is not a strategy that I would recommend. I was given the challenge, but ultimately I put my name to that article. That I look back now, I would never put my name to that article again because I don't believe in the strategy. But I took the opportunity to write it, to educate people about how it would happen. But that's the sort of thing that I now steer clear of, sort of saying. So I'm very, because we all know what happened. Kalgoorlie's sort of been relatively flat, and obviously the mining boom finished ugly. So those yields are still there, but the growth just wasn't there. So whether you got to that million would have been probably highly unlikely. And that's what I said in the caveat in the article. But still, it just highlights the point that to do it in 10 years, you need to, in terms of Craig's question, you need to win the lottery. There needs to be some type of miraculous asset that you found, or you need to have a huge amount of income coming in and have a huge amount of equity already in place for really that to be achieved inside a 10-year window, or you're going to basically buy in mining towns. And you're going to just basically, like what we said before, you're going to buy all of these assets with 7, 8, 9% yields, and you're gonna bet on that mining town, but you've just got to be mindful that with a bet like that, you carry great risk.
Yeah, we talk about get rich quick, Ben, or get rich slow. We don't like the word rich, so it could be lifestyle design slow or get rich quick, Ben. But time is a very, very important, I said it in previous answer, Ben, it's the secret sauce. You need time. So if you want to remove time out of the equation, for me, it really comes down to two things. Significantly up the risk, which you talked about, or you're on a phenomenal income. If you're on a phenomenal income, and I mean, I'm being well outside the bell curve, Ben, and you can retire out debt quicker, and you can actually leverage into assets quicker. That's how it can be done. But for most people, and then obviously, as you said, some form of windfall that comes from lotto or an inheritance or something that's out of the ordinary. But if you want to remove time out of the equation, it's either phenomenally increase the risk, be the beneficiary of a windfall, or be on a phenomenal income.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a bought Afterpay as an example, right, which is the sexy stock at the moment, we've always consistently said if you buy a business that has exponential opportunity in a global market, you could transform your life. Right? You can't really do that with residential property as a passive investor. You need to, so which comes back to some of the tips for Costa and Stephen. The tips that I have is around obviously spend less. So if you've got a lot of discretionary spending, that matters because you'll be able to retire debt down, which will increase your equity position quicker. And so, there's if you're really diligent on savings, you can accelerate your wealth position quite substantially if you want to be very thrippant with your money. And on the other side of it, you can also look to how do you maximize the income from the asset. Now, there are, again, these carry risks and also have potential impacts on capital growth. So the examples that come to mind is short-term rental accommodation, where you're basically, you turn it into an Airbnb, and there's risks in that. There's a lot more work and management and making sure it's cleaned and all of the, you've now got it fully furnished. So there's potentially challenges there in regards to that. So there's that. There's obviously adding another property like a granny flat for income on the back. And so we see a lot of these types of accelerants that people are looking at to fast track that story. And again, all of that comes with allocated time and energy and risk associated with it. But they're the main ones. I would always say to people, you could also clean the kitchen up and clean the bathroom up and give it a spruce of paint, and that could lift your rent by 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 bucks a week if it is quite run down and tired. Painting is by far the best renovating outcome you can do. So those are the little things that matter in terms of, and obviously the interest rate that you're paying on your mortgages. get them reviewed on a regular basis, because that's the biggest cost in terms of the debt that you would have. They are the little tips that I would lean into if I was looking to get an accelerated program.
Yeah, part of the active strategies, which comes under increasing the risk, really, doesn't it, Ben? So,
yep.
Very good. Good questions there. Hopefully that's helped you. So this final one here, Ben, as we work towards wrapping up this Q&A, is from Artie McFarty. I wonder if that is the genuine name, Ben.
Wonder. Yes, it's a very interesting name, Bryce.
Yeah, but if it is, great. But the question is, I'd like to see the figures behind your claims, Ben.
Ooh.
So basically, can it be done? Well, there's two ways you can do that, Ben.
Yep.
We've got an agreement with our publisher, Ben, where we go to them and we ask them if we can buy some books.
Yep.
We usually get about 300 books, Ben. We've just bought some more.
Yep.
So we can give away those books to the first people who go to thearmchairguide.com.au. We just say, if you pay for the shipping, you tell us where to send it, we'll send it to you for free. So you and I bought the book. But here's the deal, Ben. The reason I bring that up as an answer is because at the end of the book, Ben, there's 5 case studies where we go into a fair bit of detail on how to create $2,000 per week. We show the portfolio, we show the debt, we show the LVR, we show the circumstances of the folks. So that is the first way. And the second way, I would say, is for those who want to do it a little bit more advanced with you and me, we've got a course called Start and Build, Ben. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/start and build, there you can actually get access to the course. And Ben, one of the bonuses is your good self, the Property Investment Advisor of the Year in 14 and 15, as well as us being the Property Investment Advisory of the Year 18 and 19. You go through $1,000 per week passive income, $2,000 per week passive income, and $3,000 per week passive income. So it's fly on the shoulder. Fly on the wall over your shoulder to actually see how that's done. So there's 2 specific ways that you can get that, Ben. And the third way is if you go to our YouTube channel, the Empower Wealth YouTube channel, there is a presentation that you and I did many, many moons ago.
Long time ago.
So if you sort that by the number of views, it'll be in the top 2 or 3 viewed videos on the Empower Wealth YouTube channel. And there's another opportunity where we actually go through using the simulator so people can actually see under the bonnet and see what that looks like. So you can have a little look on the figures behind the claims that we make to help Artie Farty with his question, Ben.
Very good, Bryce.
I've made an assumption, Ben, that it's a he. It may be a she.
Maybe. It's a fascinating name. Bryce, what do you got for us?
We haven't had a chance to get through all of them, Ben, so that means there will be a part 3 we'll come back to in a few weeks on that. So clearly there's lots of questions, and you and I just simply do not have the ability to get through a lot in one particular podcast. So, hey, my life hack today, Ben, is it's a work from home hack, and it's largely around Zoom, Skype, Teams, Google Hangout fatigue, right? So okay. I'm going to suggest that you can change the environment when you can. So I'm going to give you an example. Yesterday, Ben, I talked about the fact that we had a presentation from a psychologist for our broader team to help them with work from home to make sure there's work-life balance. So what I actually did, Ben, is because most people can actually still do their software, whether it's Zoom, Teams, Hangout, Skype, they can do it on their mobile device, their phone, their tablets, whatever it is. So my suggestion is if you're ever in a presentation where you do not need to contribute, you need to listen. So yesterday, for example, it was a PowerPoint presentation. We were getting some tips. What I took the advantage to do, Ben, is I moved away from my standard setup and I went and changed my environment. So it could be near the fire, Ben. It could be near your favourite window of the sun. If you're blessed to be outside of Melbourne, you could go down to the park, whatever nature opportunity that you do have. But even for those people that are within the steel curtain of Melbourne at the moment, they can move room, they could change the aspect, so that they can basically get a fresher in their mind because they're still participating. And that's exactly what I did yesterday, Ben. I watched the presentation on my phone. I wasn't in my home office. I changed up the environment. So I want to remind the folks that now as we get into this rhythm of, Zoom, pretty much online meetings, we don't need to be fixed to our desktop computers, Ben. We can remain mobile and move around, and hopefully that will put an extra credit in the mental wealth bank, Ben, and mix up our day.
I love that one, Bryce, especially for those really those people who might be in a 2-bedroom apartment and they're both working from home, right? So it could be a flatmate and you're both, you're in your bedrooms or there's just one living zone. It's very difficult for those people. So I love the idea of being able to say, okay, I can listen to this on my mobile, so I might well go for a walk. If I'm not necessarily going to contribute, I can change up the environment. So a nice little idea there. Well done.
There you go. Ben, what's making property news?
So Bryce, what's making property news? I thought I would just got a little heads up that the ATO released their latest residential data in the last 10 days.
We like these stats.
I've gone into the stats, Bryce, and I've got the numbers. Now, I'm conscious of how much time we've had today, so I'll try and summarise. There's so many things that I want to lean into, but I'll just start with this podcast. I'll just look at the total numbers, Bryce. So what I'm comparing is the number of rental properties between the 2016-17 and the 17 and 18 years. So this is how long it takes, because remember, not everyone does their tax return straight away. Some people who are owed money by the tax office can take up to a year or so or more to actually put their tax returns in. So that's why they do wait to get a solid number here. So in terms of the total counts, so I'm just going to do total counts of investment properties based on the 16-17 versus 17-18 year. There were 2,156,319 in the 16-17 year to now being 2,207,893, which is an increase of 51,574, which is 2.4% increase on the previous year, Bryce. Now, would you like to know the percentage that own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 or more, Bryce?
I would love to, Ben.
Here we go. The people who own 1 or more increased.
For the 17-18 year you're talking about?
Yep, 17-18 year versus the 16-17 increased by 2.3%. And the overall number is they have 71% own 1, Bryce.
Oh, 71%. It's dropped.
71%. So that's 1.57 million in round terms, right? 2 properties or more, 418,000 of those. That was an increase of 2.7%, Bryce. And overall, they own 19. That represents 19% of people. 3 properties or more is increased by 3,869, which was a 3% increase, and that now represents 6% of all property investors.
What was the total number?
Total number there was 129,784.
Gotcha.
4 or more properties, the total number is 47,469. That's an increase of 1,009 people, and that's a variance of an increase of 2.2%. And overall, it only represents 2% of all the market. 5 properties, total number is 19,861. That's an increase of 357. 1.8%, and that represents 1% of the market. And 6 or more, Bryce, we're talking about 20,756, which is an increase of 399 people, individuals, or 2%. And again, that represents less than or 1% of the marketplace.
So Ben, let's pause and reflect on some of those numbers, because we've said that you need to have 3 to 5. So 1.57 million have 1 and 418,000 have 2. So that's pretty much the majority of all property investors have 2 or less, right? And we've said that all along. But to actually create this passive income, you need to have somewhere between 3 to 5 investment properties. So hopefully that can land for a lot of people, that it's not common. It's not as common as you think. You know, if you listen to a lot of podcasts, you read a lot of investment property magazines, it's easy to think that a lot of people have got a lot of properties, but not many people do buy multiples, Ben. So the fact that we encourage folks to buy in the first place is unusual. And then the reason I make that point is because the question around passive versus active, again, there's not a lot of people that are in the headspace to invest in property and then be active as well. So for the majority of the people, the idea of investing is a big deal. And then the idea of investing as an active investor is an even bigger deal. So hopefully some of those numbers can land for people as they're starting to mentally process where they fit into this, as they want to set themselves up to climb the summit, Ben, of lifestyle design. And as we talk about $2,000 per week. That's a good one.
There you go. That's making property news, Bryce. Sure.
Very good. Well, another great episode, Ben. We love Q&A day. Clearly, there was lots of questions that people wanted answered around climbing the summit. We've now got to part 2 on that. And I hope that that's helped a lot of people, particularly in an environment where they have to be very, very careful, Ben, about what they put into their mind and where their thoughts go, because they've got to keep them guarded, not unguarded, as Buddha told us at the beginning, at the top of the show, Ben. But, mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Go Dockers. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarizes the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.